Hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Norton, the founder of People Plus Purpose, and this is the Truth Behind Dentistry podcast. And today I am excited to have as my guest Dr. Katie Lee. Dr. Lee is a dentist, speaker, author, and coach. She was a partner in over 80 Pacific Dental Services practices throughout the US and served as clinical partner overseeing 5 states. Currently, she consults for an implant technology company and provides implant education for dentists. Dr. Lee has 2 passions in her profession. Well, maybe there's more. We already discussed skiing, so there might be another. But dentistry itself and making other dentists successful. Her passion about the oral systemic health link comes from personal experience. Dr. Lee was involved in an ATV accident as a teenager, which left her without many teeth and rendered her jaw immobile. She experienced firsthand how oral health affects systemic health and the benefits of implants. Dr. Lee authored a book entitled Saved by the Mouth to educate patients and clinicians on the importance of oral health. Welcome to the podcast, Doctor.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good. I'm excited too. So that's at least 2 of us, and I'm trusting that others watching are going to be excited as well. So to get us started, this is the Truth Behind Dentistry podcast. So sometimes I like to begin here to say, do you have any top of mind dental myths or misunderstandings that you'd like to dispel based on your experience, just as we start our conversation?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of them out there. One that I always would face in my practice from patients is, you're a dentist, you're not a real doctor. So I would like to dispel that myth. We are doctors, we're just a doctor of a different area. And, the mouth used to be connected to the rest of the body and used to be considered part of the body and essential for health. But because of political reasons over 100 years ago, it was actually extracted from the body and given kind of its own entity. And since then, it's been siloed ever since. And so what I'm trying to do is get the word out there that the mouth does belong in the body. It's critical for our systemic health and wellness and longevity. And dentists are, in fact, doctors. We know a little bit.
Yeah, well, those are a couple of radical truths that we just laid out right there.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
starting big.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, things that seem like they should be kind of no-brainers, and yet, yeah, the whole silo thing relative to politics and all of that. And so I'm always glad for people like you willing to venture out of the prescribed box in many ways, willing to speak boldly about changes that need to be made and taking action on making them, right? So,
Yeah.
so
Thank you.
good for
I
you.
think a lot of people don't understand that the way that our healthcare system is set up in the US is largely based on for-profit insurance companies or nonprofit insurance companies that still make profit, and politics, right? It's a lot of it's not based on actual science. So, when people say, "Oh, I can only go to my dentist twice a year because that's all my insurance will pay for cleanings," well, that was actually never based on science. That was based off of an insurance company's recommendation. And so I love talking about this stuff because a lot of people think that the way our healthcare system is set up and the way their insurance is set up is to benefit them and keep them healthy, when that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah. Well, if there's something good that has occurred, or one of maybe a few things good that would have occurred through the whole COVID thing, is I think there's many more people questioning many things relative to health, and that the straight line narratives may not be acceptable in a number of ways. And also what's called science and what isn't science, what's permitted to be science. These are also things we could probably talk for hours just on those things alone.
Sure.
But I know that you're passionate about your work, and anybody who doesn't already have a feel for that, based upon our introductory comments there, you'll find out more as we go. But uh, talk a little bit about the power of passion. I mean, how does that drive profitability in a practice from your perspective?
I think the more passion you have, the more profitability you have in a practice. I think they're tied hand in hand, but I also think that it's sustainable profitability versus someone just going in and wanting to be, money hungry or success hungry. You know, sure, they could be profitable and successful, but is that actually sustainable? And is that something that's going to make them inherently happy for a really long time? You'll find those practitioners, and you've seen it, who are really passionate about what they do. They're really successful in business, and they keep innovating and find ways to stay on top because they're so interested and passionate about what they're doing and helping other people. So I definitely think passion and profitability go hand in hand. And in terms of sustainable profitability, I think that's key too.
Yeah. No, I agree. I really think I've often I heard it said, and I've often quoted it saying that whoever has the most energy wins. And
Hmm.
I think that's related because passion, there's an energy to passion, right?
Totally.
There's an attraction, I think, to people who are passionate about something. And
Yeah.
then if that something actually has some a kind of a big picture benefit to people. I mean, there's a lot of things I guess we could be passionate about, but when it comes to some area of health, for example, I think that there's a multiplier effect there. So I'm glad to hear you talk about that.
Yeah. And if you think about dentists too, right? Like, we don't have the most glamorous job. And so, in order to do this for decades on end and to be happy while we're doing it, you have to be passionate about what you do. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable. You'll have a miserable team, miserable office, and you won't really, change any patients' lives for the better. So, passion is key in our industry for sure.
I've met a few of those actually.
I'm sure you have. Those are the ones that all the horror stories are written about. Like, my dentist stood on my chest to take out my tooth, or he would do fillings without anesthetic. Like, those are those people. We don't want to be those people.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of begs the question then for those that are watching, listening to us, then to say, okay, I get that about passion. I guess that makes sense. And I want to be sustainably profitable and successful, but I don't know if I'm really passionate about what I'm doing, or I don't know, maybe anything right now, much. I'm doing what I need to do. Um, and I like it okay. But what would you say if somebody was to say, as a tip for locating where that passion may be residing, or what could ignite that? How could that come into force since we're saying that it's that important?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like a lot of people are actually searching for passion. I think it comes from a couple places. One, it needs to be something that you're inherently interested in or that you really care about. Um, and so if you can find something in dentistry that's related to what you inherently care about, then you'll be able to connect, and maybe it's something totally related. Maybe you inherently care about the ocean and cleaning up the oceans and sustaining fish. Maybe somehow you can tie that into how much care you deliver and getting the word out to your patients, and maybe having them donate to your cause. Finding some sort of way to relate something that's really personal to you, to your profession, I think is key. um, and the other great thing about dentistry is it's so multifaceted. In dentistry, you can be a general dentist, you can be a specialist, you can focus on implants, you can do sedation, you can see kids, you can treat airway, you could treat, TMJ pain or TMD. You can treat oral systemic health, which is what I love. So there's all different things inside dentistry. You don't have to focus on the whole bucket of dentistry. You can kind of narrow down to just things that you're specifically interested in. And I always tell people, don't do the things that you don't like to do.
Mm.
And I think, as I'm a general dentist, and I think a lot of general dentists feel that because we have that title general dentist, we need to do everything, and we don't. So if there's a type of procedure or a type of, patient, subsector of your patient database that you don't like to treat, or you're not very good at treating, don't do it, because
Yeah.
it's going to make you get burnt out. It's going to make you resent your job. And I always like to stay in my happy place, and I encourage other people to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good advice. I'm not a fan of toleration much, and I wouldn't imagine you would be either. And I do think that people tolerate a lot, that they'll stay stuck in places. And I think sometimes it's because change is not always pleasant. It's hard to see walking into the future. It seems safer to stay doing what I'm doing. But I'll often come back to, I mean, we don't know how long we have on the planet to make a contribution and to know joy in the journey, right? So I always feel like it's worth taking the risks to move into something. So do you find that uh, that once into practice for a little while and kind of doing what you feel like you need to do, maybe you haven't really found fully some things that completely turn you on, but that there's too much settling for that and maybe not enough time to be allocated? Or what would you say that might be holding some of our viewers back from exploring until they find something that they can connect to that passion, or they find a particular thing that is directly dental that actually does get them excited?
I think the biggest thing is just creating space for that. I tend to look at my metrics in my practice, and anytime that I noticed that my practice was kind of plateauing, not growing in terms of revenue, not growing in bottom line, not growing in number of patients that we were seeing, or in just how I was feeling. If I noticed that my energy level was low, that often coincided to I had hit a plateau personally and professionally. And then what I needed to do to get myself out of that funk is I would have to create a new BHAG, like big, hairy, audacious goal.
Mm.
Um, that I could then go and chase. I almost needed a new shiny penny, something to keep it interesting. And the best way to do that is you got to create space to go after and chase after that. And so I feel like creating space is the hardest thing for clinicians to do, because we have staff that we need to make sure we're giving hours. We have patients we need to make sure that we're, getting in to see, and we have family commitments. But carving out half a day a week to go chase some goal, I think is critical, and it'll make you that much more productive in every other hour and time frame of your practice. And so I always encourage people to do that. When they tell me they're falling flat or their practice is falling flat, I say you need to go get a new goal. Get a new goal and carve out half a day a week to chase it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Makes me think, I believe we've spoken previously about one of my offering elements in my work is assessments, strengths-based assessments that I provide. And one of my core four is called inspiration sources. And it makes me think about a client a little while back that there's 7 different C's of inspiration. And so creativity or innovation was one that was super, super high for him, more than most other dentists. And one of his frustrations or blockages was the fact that he was bored. He was 7 years in, talked about the golden handcuffs, right? And just didn't know what to do at that point. I'm kind of bound. I've got to deliver on, I'm still paying off loans, and I've got, I'm married with a child, and so ultimately he was bored with the routine things. And so it led to that, just that insight on the assessment led to conversation about what would that look like from a creative innovation standpoint. He started talking about inventions that he had in mind, and what were some new possibilities that he might be interested in offering. And I said, well, I mean, could that be possible? You have an associate who does, bless
Excuse
you,
me.
who does more of some of the basic bread and butter dentistry, and you get to explore some of these things. I mean, he lit up and he went like, somebody has seen me, whereas I was just telling myself no to
Mhm.
these things. Right. So what are your thoughts about any of that and how that interfaces with people that you speak with?
I mean, I think that is the most common condition of all dentists once they get, a few years in, is it's like, am I really going to be doing this for the rest of my life? Dentistry can get so monotonous. Patients come in for their 3 and 6 month checkups. You go in, check after the hygiene, tell them they have cavities or crowns that they need, or a tooth out. I mean, it just becomes so monotonous. Staff issues can really bog you down, especially during COVID. That was really hard when everyone was exiting the profession. And if you're not constantly creating and innovating, you will get stuck, you will get bored, your practice will plateau, your profitability will decrease, and you'll become miserable. That's why they say, they used to say dentists had the highest suicide rate. It's not that way anymore, but and then you're told by patients all day long that they hate coming to see you. And so you combine all that together, it can make for a pretty gloom outlook. And one of the things that I always did to keep myself going when I would make these new big goals is I would innovate in the way of, I'm not an inventor, I wouldn't create new products, but I would come up with a new technique or procedure that I'd want to learn, or I'd want to integrate a new technology into the practice. And
Nice.
that always kept things new and fresh. My staff loved it because it kept them on their toes. I loved it because it was a new shiny thing for me to focus on. And then patients loved it because I had more offerings to bring to them. And that kept them, wanting to come to my practice versus going out and seeking out a different provider.
Yeah,
So innovation is so important.
yeah, that's good. So differentiation. So yeah, why would you say it's important to differentiate in a dental practice, and what are some ideas for how to go about exploring that?
So, people used to think about differentiation in terms of, I got to differentiate myself from the dentist down the street. What do I offer that other dentist doesn't offer? And that's fine, but I feel like that's a pretty short-sighted and maybe a very beginner way of thinking about it. And I think it is great to think of that in the beginning. But in my mind, when I'm trying to differentiate myself, I'm competing against other things that are taking my patient's time and attention,
Mm.
such as, other types of medical practitioners or hobbies or, the restaurant scene or, anything that may be taking my patient out of my practice. I need to differentiate the care that I give and the experience that I'm giving patients so that they'll want to come and spend time at my practice and want to come and spend their money at my practice to get healthier. And so I always am thinking about that. It's not just the dentist down the street. It's, how can I differentiate myself so that I stand out in my patient's mind so that they want to come be with me? And I like to combine my differentiation with my passion. I find that makes me sit in a very authentic place.
Mhm.
And it's something that can come across very genuine to patients. And so I'm very passionate about oral systemic health and dental implants. And so I like to be able to dive deep into those areas so that I can provide the latest technologies in those areas and also the latest treatment modalities. And so, we provide salivary testing. We provided a whole gamut of different periodontal therapies. And then with dental implants, it's not anymore, but it was pretty unique for a general dentist to be able to provide that for a patient. More general dentists are doing that now, which is awesome.
Mhm.
But we, would focus on same day implants, and a complete digital workflow to make it more seamless, and less pain points and less friction for the patient. So I like to combine innovation, with passion and that's how I differentiate myself in my practice.
Yeah, I love that combination. I'm not
Thanks.
I'm not sure I've heard those juxtaposed in that same way, but it seems like we should, right? We should think of those two things
Yeah.
alike. And it all seems so much more important if people are wanting to be liberated more from insurance dependency, right? If you're going to um, not compete on cheapest, most available on everybody's list, and instead say, no, we're going to compete on amazing.
Yeah.
It seems like combining that the energy of passion with something that actually has you uniquely differentiated, like to where you could say, we're not just the best at this, we're like the only thing that you should
Yeah.
do. We're the only answer.
And I think that the people who do compete on price and do offer the cheapest, there's definitely a place for them as well. And it is definitely needed. And there are patients out there that unfortunately can't afford, alternative care. And so those dentists definitely, serve a time and place. That's not something that I wanted to focus on. I often find that, uh, the more passion you have, the better you are at something. And the better you are at something, then you don't have to race your way to lowest competitive price. And so I think you'll often find, those dentists who are racing the way to the bottom, unfortunately, sometimes lack that passion, which is kind of sad because they are serving such a great purpose in the community. But you'll find a lot of dentists who, have a little bit higher fees or who aren't taking insurance. Those are usually the ones that are super passionate about something.
Yeah, and thanks for circling back and gathering in our viewers that I just alienated by by talking about competing on cheap, right?
Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. I just,
No,
I've
I
been
mean, I thought that was, at least that keeps everybody, there's a place for everybody, I guess.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. Before I was a dentist, and even in my early days of dentistry, like there was no way I could afford, all of this expertise and specialized care. I put myself through undergrad and dental school.
Sure.
And so I had a lot of loans for a long time.
That,
And so those people definitely serve to improve health, and they serve at a time and a place. And so I don't want to discount what they do at all, but there's also this alternative form of healthcare as well.
yeah, good. Well said. Thank you. Um, so looking ahead, um, I mean, you're already passionate now, but as you look ahead for where you see dentistry going, or maybe where you'd like to see it going more, what comes up for you? What do you forecast, and what would be your wish list, maybe too, if you could have something become more true?
Yeah. In terms of forecasting, I'm not sure if I'm qualified to forecast. My wish and where my hunch is that I think more people are becoming aware of the oral systemic connection. And so I think patients are going to start to see the value of dentistry more. I already saw it from when I started practicing in 2010 to when I left chairside in 2023. When I first started in 2010, everyone told me that their gums always bled and that was normal. Then over time, starting probably around 2015, people started to say like, my gums are bleeding. This is not normal. And so people are starting to really realize that the health of their gums and their teeth is really important to their overall health. Airway is becoming really huge. I think a lot of people are starting to tap into airway and understanding that that is a big issue. And so I think people will start to go seek out dental care more. My wish would be, the mouth would be reconnected to the rest of the body. And not only would patients see that value, but that dentists would see the value, because there's a lot of dentists who don't understand that the mouth is connected to the body.
Right.
And then it'd be great if, physicians and specialists, medical specialists would start to really see the value in dental care and incorporate it into as standard procedure for a lot of things they do. For example, I do a lot of work with oral health and fertility. And the research is undeniable that the state of someone's oral health will affect if they can get pregnant, if they can maintain a pregnancy, if they can have a healthy delivery, and if they can be healthy after delivery. But yet, no fertility doctors that I'm aware of require an oral microbiome test before starting to treat a patient.
Mm.
So I would really like to start to see some medical doctors incorporate oral health screenings before they do medical procedures.
I love it. That's breaking out of the siloed approach, right? And looking at, can we have more collaboration? Can there be more interest in sharing of, since we don't know the research in all other health fields, right? We don't know other specialties, all the research that's there, or why something is important. Can we bridge that more? I think that that's so important, and that's a hope of
Totally.
mine as well moving forward. For those that are, again, I'm imagining the fertility angle. There's got to be people who are watching who would go, didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
So what else, maybe for a minute or two, would you say about what else doctors or hygienists may not know, uh, or maybe vaguely familiar with from an oral microbiome perspective, or oral systemic kind of connections? What other elements are there that people could get passionate about, maybe?
Yeah, so the one of the first things that we knew about was that the oral microbiome and inflammation in the mouth affects heart disease. So we know that 50% of all heart attacks and strokes are caused by oral bacteria. not only do they cause heart attacks and strokes, but if a patient does have oral infectious bacteria, it makes the heart attacks and strokes more deadly.
Mm.
Um, we know that there are specific bacteria in the mouth that cross the blood-brain barrier and are found in Alzheimer's patients. So there
Mm.
is a very strong link. I probably can't say causation 100%, but we're almost there about oral bacteria causing Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
Um, in certain cases, about not all Alzheimer's cases are caused by oral bacteria, but oral bacteria can cause Alzheimer's.
Right.
We know it's implicated in colon cancer and pancreatic cancer. We know it's implicated in leaky gut, arthritis, eczema, diabetes, all of it. So
Yeah.
I don't think that there's an organ system that oral health doesn't affect, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's because the mouth is part of the body, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Shocking, right? Shocking.
connected by a common bloodstream,
Yeah,
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 as far as communication.
yeah.
So for those that are with us then, and thinking, okay, that makes sense. And I've heard about those things, and I know some maybe, but I haven't really taken steps in that direction. What are some thoughts as to initial actions that someone could take that you recommend that they take to kind of move into this a little bit more to see if it is
Yeah.
something for them?
I think the first thing that I would recommend someone doing is getting educated themselves, because as I mentioned, not all dentists are even up to speed on this. It wasn't something that was known about, even when I graduated in 2010, there was a study that had just come out saying that there was an association between heart disease and gum disease. So this isn't information that's existed for decades that everyone knows. So there is going to be some catch up in the dental profession to get fully educated on this. So I always recommend patients to do their own research and to get as educated as they can. That's why I wrote, the book Saved by the Mouth, because I wanted people to understand the information that is out there so that they can ask the appropriate questions to receive the right care. Once they get educated, then it's about going out and asking your current dentist if he or she is up to date on this information, or if they're willing to get up to date on it. And if they're not, maybe finding a provider that is, so that they can render or receive the care that's needed, especially if they already have a systemic condition. 7 out of 10 Americans have a chronic condition. And so that's why oral health is so critical right now in the US, is that we have got to find a way to lower our chronic systemic conditions, and it's only getting worse. We're not getting better. We're not getting healthier.
Yeah. You want to say something a little bit more about the book?
Sure. Yeah. I wrote a book. I had been talking about oral systemic health in my practice for so long and training other doctors on it. And so everyone kept saying, why don't you just put this all down in the book? And so I wrote a book. It's called Saved by the Mouth. The whole idea, again, was to educate patients so that they knew the right kinds of questions to ask, and to also educate them for them to realize, like, your systemic condition probably has some root in your mouth as well. So you should probably listen to your dentist when they tell you, to do certain treatments. It's also a heavily researched book. And so I wanted it to be scientific enough that it would be respected by clinicians. And it has been. It's been really well received. And in the book, what's nice is I go through every different organ system, the main ones that the mouth affects. And I tell a patient story to kick off the chapter about how a patient presented at my practice with this condition. This is also what was in their mouth. We treated their mouth and it improved their condition. So there's real life stories about how important oral health is. And then in the latter part of the book, I talk about tangible things that you and your dentist can do together in the office to test and improve your oral health, and then things that you can do at home to improve your oral health and wellness. And those come from, hygiene habits. It comes from supplementation with minerals and vitamins and food and things like that. And then I also talk about airway and stress reduction and sleep, which is so important.
And I'm guessing that the book is available through any of the regular sources.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people are buying it on Amazon, but it's Barnes and Noble. It's anywhere books are sold, they could get it.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'd like to recommend that everybody
Thank you.
watching that they get a copy of that. Uh,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, absolutely. And as I'd mentioned just informally with you before we started, that I just feel like given all that you've got going and what your vision, your passion, back to passion, for this topic area, that we'll likely be having at least one more conversation, because I feel like there's so much more to talk about. I feel like we just kind of touched on a few key elements today. Is there anything else that you want to say that we didn't cover that would be important to before we end that you'd like to share?
I think it's important to note too, now that dentistry is becoming more objective and diagnostic. You know, when you go to your primary care provider, they will run a whole gamut of blood tests, stool tests to check to see how healthy you are. And in dentistry, we didn't have that for, you know, a really long time. And so it was just up to the provider's discretion on whether or not they thought you had a cavity or gum disease or something. And so what's really cool is that in dentistry, we actually have these tests now. And so you can get a microbiome or bacteria saliva test to see what bacteria are in your mouth. You can get enzyme tests to see, you know, how much bacteria is getting into your bloodstream. You can do inflammatory testing to see if your inflammation levels are high, HPV testing to see if you're at risk for cancer. I mean, the tests go on and on. And so what's nice is once you have the data, you know, you can unequivocally know, yes, you have an infection or a condition or not, receive the appropriate treatment, and then post-test to make sure that the treatment was successful. And so it's a really exciting time in dentistry because we're becoming way more data-driven now and way more exact with our care for patients. So it's fun. It's cool.
That's great. Is that kind of comprehensive list of testing in your book, or if not, is there a best place to kind of have an overview of those different options?
So I do talk about all those tests in the book for sure. A lot of patients, you know, started reaching out to me after I released the book saying, hey, I love my dentist, but I want all these tests. They don't provide it. Can you give me these tests? And so people can book an appointment with me on my website and I can ship them tests. They can take the saliva test at home and then we can go over the results together and then put together a care plan for them to take back to their provider so that they can get specific precision care.
Perfect, because that was the next thing I was going to ask, is for people who want to connect with you, want to know more, the best way to do that. Maybe you can mention your website and whatever the other ways to contact you.
Sure. So the best way is probably through the website. It's katieleedds.com. They can book appointments with me, shoot me an email, reach out to me on that. The second best way is probably Instagram. I'm pretty good at answering those messages. And just there, my handle's katieleedds.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I so appreciate the time. This
Thanks.
was fun and informative, and I just appreciate you coming on to share.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. So until next time, right?
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay. So thanks everybody for watching. This is the Truth Behind Dentistry podcast, and I have been with Dr. Katie Lee for this compelling conversation about passion, linking us to oral systemic health and beyond. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you.